I am going to call this dream the warehouse. I had this dream in 2005. And the way the dream starts out, there was a warehouse. And in this warehouse, if you can imagine a 2-story brick building, red brick building, that had a bunch of shelves in it. There's all kinds of stuff on the shelves, boxes of this and that. On the top of one of the shelves was even a boat. On another one was a kayak. There was all kinds of equipment. It was all seemed to be organized. And at one end of the warehouse was a platformed room where, because the warehouse was about 2 stories tall, and there was a room up above that basically where a second story would be, but it was up on like a platform of a sort, so you had to walk up steps to get into the room. And the room had windows that looked out over the warehouse. All the shelves in the warehouse were 2 stories tall in some spots. But there was a space for stuff to be stacked on top. So the warehouse, like I said, was red brick. And there was no windows on the warehouse. But there was several exit doors and there was a couple roll-up doors at one end. But how the dream goes, I was walking through the warehouse with a group of people. I evidently knew them. I don't recognize any of them, like, from my life. But I remember, like, in the dream, it was as if I knew them. And this is a first-person dream. So we were walking through, pointing out some stuff on the shelves and this and that. And then we go over and we go up the steps and go up to the room up above. And in the room, there was couches, there was a TV, there was some radio equipment, there were some fridges with refreshments, and we got drinks out. And we were just talking and having a decent time. Don't know what we were talking about. Can't remember. It wasn't, like, important, I would say. But we got some drinks out of the fridge, and some sodas or whatever, and sat down and started drinking, sitting on the couches and stuff along those lines. And then at some point, I was like, hey, I'm going to go step outside and have a cigarette. So I went down the steps and went out one of the back doors to have a cigarette. And as I walked outside on the back of the warehouse, the rest of the outside of the warehouse came into view of the fact that it was a big, 2-story warehouse, everything along those lines. There was gravel and pavement around the warehouse. There was no trees. And behind the warehouse, about probably 100 yards maybe 50 yards, there was a railroad track. And the ground ramped up a little bit to the railroad track and then went down the other side. And on the other side of the railroad track was grass and what looked like, some bushes and stuff like that. Might have been a house back there. I can't quite remember. I do remember there was bushes and trees, almost like there was woods. And in front of the warehouse was just fields, emptiness, woods, fields, stuff like that. So there wasn't much around. But as I stepped out back of the warehouse and lit a cigarette, I was standing there for a minute, and then all of a sudden I hear this rumbling, and I look over to down a little ways, and there's a road, I'd say probably 300 yards away from the warehouse, where the road crosses over the railroad tracks. So it goes up to the railroad tracks and crosses over, normal railroad crossing, but there was no like stuff on the, the sticks that go down when there's a train crossing, something like that. And then it goes down the other side and it loops around and goes past the warehouse. So, kind of does a bend right around the warehouse and keeps going. And as I look over, there is a series of military vehicles rolling down the road. The interesting thing is that in one of the vehicles, the front vehicle looked like a vehicle that you would see from World War II. Spoke tires. It had the open cab area. kind of like it would be a cloth cab that they would pull up over top, something like that. And there was like 2 people sitting in the front and 1 person, high ranking evidently, with medals and stuff like that, sitting in the back. And behind them were a whole bunch of like more modern vehicles though, SUVs, stuff like that. And they come rolling over the railroad tracks, rounding the bend towards the warehouse. And I kind of got freaked out. In my dream, I got freaked out. And I was like, oh no. And then they started pulling to the parking lot in the front of the warehouse where those roll-up doors were. And I went to go to get back into the warehouse to warn my friends that I was with, and the door was locked. I could not get back in the warehouse. So I turned and took off running towards the tree line. So I had to cross over the railroad tracks and run towards the tree line that was directly behind the railroad tracks. And as I got over there, I got close to the tree line, crossed over the railroad tracks, jumped over them, just kept going. And I got close to the tree line, and all of a sudden a whole bunch of soldiers jumped out of the tree line and marching towards the warehouse. And someone or something grabbed me and yanked me into the bushes. And it was like the soldiers that were coming out of the bushes marching to the warehouse didn't even see me. And then for a moment there, I thought they were capturing me. But then I realized like maybe they're not capturing me. But I was still freaking out kind of in my mind in the dream, like, oh no, my friends, people I care about, they're about to get like taken out or something like that. I have no idea. But that was the end of the dream. And it was quite odd because, the whole symbolism with a warehouse full of stuff, people inside I knew, but did I really know them? Collecting a lot of stuff, and it didn't seem like it was just odd. All kinds of odd things were in the warehouse. The warehouse had no windows to it, but there was a comfortable living space. I went down an exit, got out an exit door out the back to step outside to smoke, and then that's when I saw the enemy coming. And that's what it felt like. The soldiers that were coming were enemies. They weren't there to help or do anything like that. They were enemies of some sort. And then I couldn't get back in the warehouse to warn anybody. And they were already coming at me, so I ran to the tree line. And for some reason, the soldiers that came out of the tree line, like a whole line of them, probably 100 of them, something like that, just all stepped out in one file, running the length of the tree line. They stepped out, and something grabbed me and yanked me into the tree line. Like they didn't see me, and I'm like, I don't understand that dream. Don't understand any parts of it, but it was interesting none the least. That was it.